So for those of you who don't know, my name is Sara McComb. I am one of the co-founders of the Women's Tech Forum. Thank you guys all so much for coming. You cannot even believe how much this means to us for a multitude of reasons, none of the least of which, 4 years ago last Wednesday, 4 of us were sitting at a picnic table over at the pool bar at the Modern. It was myself, Susie Gleason, Elena Winters, and Bryn Fowler. And we sat there and we said, why the hell aren't there more women? And why don't we know each other? And so out of that, WTF was born. As many of you know, we lost Bryn back in October. Sorry. Okay, so she was a huge part of us, and she can't be replaced, but we are continuing forward, of course, in her name and in everything she believed in. So first off, we're going to have just a little bit of a chat. I'm going to moderate a discussion with Sara Baack from Equinix and Belle Lajoie from Cloudscene. And before we get started with that, I want to thank our sponsors, AECom, CoreSite, Digital Realty, Google, Facebook, Rogers, and Netflix. Thank you all so much. This would not be occurring without you, so we really appreciate that. If anyone is interested in becoming a sponsor, please see Susie Gleason. She is our sponsorship chair, and she can give you more information about our sponsorship programs. Finally, once we're done here, we will be scooting out and we will be heading outside to the lanai, where we will have more drinks, appetizers, general merriment, under the sun and the sunset. So we'll get done with this and we'll go do the fun stuff. But we have 2 rules with WTF. First, no selling. Second, introduce yourself to somebody you don't know. This organization was born out of a desire to make sure that the women knew each other. So please have a conversation with someone. You will not believe what you will learn from it. So with that, I would like to invite Sara Baack from Equinix and Belle Lajoie from Cloudscene up to join me. And clearly we all got the black and white memo.
Yeah, we nailed that.
Definitely. Okay, so our discussion tonight is going to be about a variety of topics. It's meant to be casual. We'll see what happens with it. But general themes are going to be around the concept of the journey of your career, allyship, diversity, and just how we grow. So first off, I'd love it if the 2 of you could just give a brief introduction of yourselves and what you're doing.
What I'm doing. Hi everyone. I'm Belle Lajoie. You got the name right too. I'm very impressed.
I did
Lajoie.
study French for 8 years.
Oh, okay. That. Thank God, because I get Lajoie and it's not nearly as cool as Lajoie. I'm CEO of Cloudscene. Previous to that, I was the global chief commercial officer for Megaport, and I specialize in scaling up startups.
Welcome. Nice to meet you,
Welcome.
Bella. I know I've talked to you, I think, a couple times before. Hi, everyone. I'm Sara Baack. I'm the Chief Product Officer of Equinix, and I run product marketing, network, and software engineering for the company. I've been there for 7 years, and I was CMO for quite a while before I took this new assignment. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to start off a little bit about talking about the journey of your careers. So there's a lot of aspects that we could discuss, but specifically what I'd like to talk about is the concept of creating value to create opportunity. So in your opinion, what is the importance of creating value? And that could be value of any sort, value to your boss, value to your customer, value to your coworkers. What is the importance of it, and where have you done this in your career that has then equaled success?
Okay. Me first? Okay. So I think I've spoken to a couple of people about this before. I never set out to be professionally successful and C-level or have some particular leadership role. It never was on the bucket list for me. It was all about what value can I provide in each particular role with the skill set I have. And that's really the way, and you said the J word, journey already. The journey to my success path was really about creating value. If I see a staff member that is genuinely, they have the intention that they really want to create value and they're showing me that they want to create value for the company, for themselves, for our team, I obviously want to reward that. So that's certainly something that's worked for me. In every single role, I've looked at what value that I could provide.
What she said. No, I mean, I guess I think those concepts are inextricably linked. Like the idea of building a career off of something other than creating value is kind of hard for me to fathom. And, and I'd say for me, I think value creation, I mean, when people ask me for career advice, I give them the most boring career advice because I tell them, like, work your ass off. Like, put your head down and work your butt off, and good things will happen. And I think in the equation of working your butt off, right, that really comes down to showing your boss, your company, your stakeholders, your colleagues that what you're doing is making an impact and making a difference on the success of the business. And so if you can, if you're doing that, I think the equation, it's sort of a natural equation that follows that success can follow you. And so that's, in a nutshell, I think you hit on the exact formula, which is value creation equals career success.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen that as well. Like, what I kind of also attribute it back to some of the people that have been the best managers that I've seen are the ones who don't seek it, are the ones who just do the job well, and then people naturally come to them. And I think that is then part of creating value, is once you do that, it radiates out from you, and it becomes so important, and you become relied upon. You become important to the people around you.
That's huge. It becomes your brand. Yes. If your brand is that you are adding value, then it's a virtuous cycle that you create, for sure.
Definitely. So what are some of the ways that you have been able to document? Because sometimes you do
Guys, there's chairs up here, too.
Oh, yeah,
so
we have
we're
chairs
not shy. No one's going to bite
here.
you. Come on up and join us.
Come on up.
Yay!
Totally pressured her to do that.
But
Brittany, get your butt up here and sit down in a chair.
So I will say, though it's great to be the person that just gets to do the job, do it well, and always get rewarded, that's not the way it always works. You do have to toot your own horn. You do have to put your hand up and say, you know what? I'm awesome. And this is why. So what are some of the ways that you've been able to document the value and you've brought that to the table and communicated it to your management to help you then succeed and grow?
So for me, documentation is really, really important. Obviously, I've come from the commercial side of the business, so it's quite easy for me to show my measurables, whether it be revenue or OPEX savings or whatever it is at that given time. But in addition to documentation, critical feedback, I think, is really important because you can obviously show your value in that particular meeting or that exchange with your manager or your exec or your board, whoever you're dealing with. But they will tell you what's valuable. So ask what's valuable. So it's one of those things, you can show the measurable, but your measurable might not be valuable to them. It's like, hey, I did this amazing thing, I made all this revenue, or I did whatever, and they're like, cool story, that's really not that great. And you can genuinely ask what is, and the highest performers that I've ever worked with, including myself, I crave critical feedback because it will tell me exactly what I'm doing wrong and what I'm doing right, and I want the most critical constructive feedback I can get in order to kind of move that number or whatever it might be that I'm working on at the time.
I echo that completely. I mean, I would say, I think that, I'll just let you talk. I'll sit down here and have my champagne. I guess what I got used to kind of early, maybe as a function of the job and the cultures that I was in at a very, kind of young age, was defining success. Like, what is going to measure success? And even though I wasn't in a sales job where that's a little bit more clear and tangible sort of as part of the equation, I would work very hard to say, well, what's going to be, if I want to do initiative X, Y, and Z, like, what's going to define that I've done that? at the end of the year. And I've kind of gotten into a habit of for myself, frankly, saying, like, what did I achieve this year? And I write that all down. And part of that is maybe because I think of myself as a person I'm really motivated by making an impact. I mean, like, getting paid well and getting recognized and all that stuff is like nice. But like, I know that like what feeds me is actually making a difference. And so I like to be able to know what that difference looks like and kind of set that up ahead of time. And I think, the way that I've been able to in my career end up working on things that are, higher risk and higher impact for companies are doing a lot of things that are lower risk and lower impact, but being clear about what it is that I'm doing, and to Bella's point, like what it is the company is valuing in what I'm doing, and connecting those all up front is, I think, really powerful.
So what recommendations do you have for anyone here in the room or in general for those who are looking to advance in their career, that they need to establish value? You guys have talked about documentation. You've talked about asking for feedback. Is there anything else that you would recommend?
I'll start. One of those, because I'm on a roll now. So one of the things that I talk to a lot of women in my company about, or in my past lives, is just being comfortable. It's, sort of, we all have this imposter syndrome thing. Like, I can't speak up if I don't know the answer. And I'm sort of a poster child for asking all of the stupidest questions that exist in a particular meeting. And then what'll happen is, like, a whole bunch of the guys will come up to me after the meeting and they'll say, "I'm so glad you asked that question." And so I think we don't know the power of our own curiosity, and we feel like maybe intimidated by like taking up the space that you have in meetings and in forums and in dialogue in our careers. And so my number one thing I tell people is, don't be afraid of looking stupid, because that'll only make you stupid. So for every like 2 genius things I say 10 stupid things on the way to that 2 genius points. And so as long as your ratio is still, as long as your batting average is not horrible, like, you should do that, because that's, you need to practice like putting your ideas out there. Like, that's my number 1 thing. My number 2 thing is being okay being criticized. And actually that took me a really long time. Like, I had a thin skin for a really long time, and I was a big perfectionist, and I was very much like, can do. Like, I was always going to get it right until I didn't. And then when someone had to tell me that, and it was like my world fell apart. And, that's like a serious first world problem that you figure out as you get older. Like, you determine, like, you could put those things in perspective. But it takes maybe some time and seasoning to feel okay about having criticism and having people poke at you and not taking that personally. And that is a huge, huge asset. If you can be like allow those comments and things to like permeate you but not define you, is a big thing. And one last thing, I know I'm hogging the floor, but one other last quick thing is, there's this book that, and I'm so not a self-help book guru person, but there's this book called The 4 Agreements. Has anyone heard of this book? Yeah. Okay, Don Miguel Ruiz. And so he writes, so The 4 Agreements, and I've looked back at this on my life. The first time I read it, I was like, this is all like psychobabble, like, I don't get it. And then I read it, several years later, and I was like, this man is a genius. And the 4 agreements, let's see if I can remember them. The 4 agreements are, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, always keep to your word, or be impeccable with your word. And the other one is, like the equivalent of work your ass off, like work really hard. And to me, that guy's, the embodiment of what he's, how he's coaching people to show up is I think very much for me has been a recipe in my older years for success.
I would agree. And I think as part of like getting feedback, you have to be able to give it as well. You have to reach the point where you're okay, because so often we're afraid of not being liked. We're afraid of saying the thing that somebody's going to get mad at us. And it's like, you know what? No, you have to be able, if you expect to get it, you have to be able to give it. And that, I think, also helps you be seen because you become a voice that is decisive, is saying the things that maybe are uncomfortable to say, but helps other people think, even if that's just to one person or to a room.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are on a roll. So to your point, though, I do take the emotion out of all of that constructive criticism as well. I mean, I always look at what is the logic behind what they've said, rather than what did they say about me and what I did. It's what's the actual logic, and that makes me really stand back, know that it's not about me, and you know, I mean, it's perfect advice. I have nothing else to add. You've nailed it. So I'll just shut up now too. For agreement. Everyone get that book?
Clearly, everyone needs to go buy that book. All right. So we're going to switch topics, and we're going to go to the topic of gender and allies. So gender plays a dividing role in what we do, no matter how much we don't want it to do so. So what is something throughout your career that has helped you tackle the gender divide in our industry and succeed?
I got a good one. Okay, so I've been very, very lucky. Probably in the first 10, 11 years of my career, I never really found a proper, I didn't really have gender disparity. I was in that really good generation, that I had a really good team, really good founder, never really affected me until probably the last 2 years. And that was because I fell pregnant and had a baby. So I fell pregnant.
I don't know how that would have happened. I mean, my goodness.
I don't know how it happened either. I had a holiday, that's what happened. So I've never been able to holiday since. But I really found it was completely massive 180. So I never felt any gender difference, whatever, never thought about it until I was literally smuggling a basketball. Like, I literally didn't tell anybody I was pregnant. Some of the girls in the audience would know this. I smuggled a basketball for about 22 weeks. So I was halfway pregnant, and I didn't want to tell anybody because I was shit scared about going into my exec and board and say, I fell pregnant, because I was the only woman as well. So that was a really interesting experience for me, and I genuinely have learnt a lot about that, about how to lead working parents. I really didn't know the sacrifice. You know, everyone says you never know. Until I saw myself in that position to go, oh my gosh, these people do not understand what it's like for a woman to step out, have a baby, come back, and just be like, everything's fine, everything's normal, I'm cool, also exhausted. So, you know, that, for me, I have been able to, when coming back to your question on how gender disparity has come and led me to have successes out of that, is I am so empathetic and such a great leader to parents. And I've been able to put in programs in place for maternity and parental leave and all of these particular things that I really didn't understand before. And that's really, I mean, that gender disparity was heartbreaking for me as well. And I've been able to flip it and help a lot of other people and a lot of other women in my organisation.
That's awesome. I don't have anything good to add to that necessarily, but I would say, you know, for me, like the best, the way you ask the question, like how have you coped with gender disparity, and like what's a, you know, kind of a mechanism you've used to address it. I mean, for me, most of the time, I just pretend it's not there, even when it is. And because I think somehow like acknowledging it is like almost like giving oxygen to the fire in some ways. And so I just generally, my MO is sort of operating as if it's not there at all, which I suppose maybe not be the best coping mechanism, but has generally worked for me. I mean, I think I feel like I show up to my male colleagues as someone that they see me for me first before they see that Sara's female. And I think that's because I try to show up like that's not really part of the equation of the relationship that I have with them. But I would echo Bella's point about like motherhood. I mean, motherhood in some sense was actually an empowering thing for me professionally. So for anybody who's in the room and like worrying about, you know, maybe you're at that crossroads of thinking about that or in the middle of it or in the thick of it, like for me, that was like a very good defining moment. I have twins. And yes, bow down to me. No, I remember the story. Like, I used to tell people how I would figure out how to breastfeed on my commute, and I had a car charger for my breast pump. And I would always wear an open blazer, and I would like lean over the car seat, or the steering wheel. Yeah. So anyone who needs to know about that, approach me later. But for me, like, being a mother was sort of like it's like the ultimate efficiency teacher, because you figure out, like, oh my God, what did I do with my time? Like, before I had children. And so it does, like, kind of, it almost helps you hone your it helps you really prioritize, like, in it to a different extent than I had ever been forced to do before. And so in some ways, I know for people who feel intimidated by balancing it all, like, that's actually weirdly helped me. And that doesn't mean that you don't make a ton of sacrifices and you suffer in certain ways, but it's actually been beneficial for my career in, like, a weird circular way.
So I want to shift to the concept of finding allies. So the concept of male allies is a topic that, as WTF, we admit we don't have the answer. We're still trying to figure it out. And there is no one way to do it, because it's going to depend on everybody's individual situation. But I'd like to hear when and where in your career did you establish male allies that it helped you? And did you actively go out and pursue these men in a non-sexual way? Or were those relationships that occurred naturally that then they were an ally for you?
Okay. So certainly with my executive is always, it's a work in progress, and male allies are really, really important there. I've had a really great male ally with our founder, Bevan Slattery. He's basically the male version of Sheryl Sandberg. I've literally put his face on the Lean In book because he's just ridiculous. His hashtag, did you see his hashtags of this event? Oh my God. That came really naturally, purely only because of value, though. I mean, showing him value through the multiple companies that I've worked for him. Obviously you get an ally when you're creating value and you're loyal and all of that jazz. But one of the most things that I'm most proud of is hiring allies. And I didn't realize this until I was really thinking about it. I have hired the most amazing men and women who are genuinely incredible allies, and I'm so proud of them, and I'm proud of coaching them, and because I've hired people that have had similar values to what I want, what the company wants, the same culture, and so I think sometimes when we think about male allies, it's always above us. We're always thinking, oh, well, how can I get allies that are on our exec, on our board, so they can support me? It's actually not always above you. It's always, who you're hiring, who are your peers, because the people who are under you in your teams are actually the ones that are going to bat for you the most, if they're genuinely, truly allies. And some of those men are 5-star. Love them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I guess the first thing I'd say, I think it's critical to have men. I mean, men are in all the positions of power. So, like, you have to build alliances with them. Like, so that formula is sort of a given, that we have to figure out how to do that as women to be successful and to kind of rise up. You have to build relationships with those in power. And, I guess my approach to that has generally been, like, back to your very first question of showing value, such that those folks, like, want to ally with me, and they want to bring me along to whatever, like, cool thing they're going off to do, has been maybe one path for me to building alliances. But I'd say the other thing is, for any of you guys who worked on a nonprofit and have fundraised for a nonprofit, right, that you always get in the awkward position of, like, having to make the ask, like, will you please? So I used to be on the board of Planned Parenthood, and which is sort of you never know, like, where people will come out on Planned Parenthood, right? I'm pro-choice, but anyway, you have to make this ask to people, and I was always, like, had a lot of like trepidation about that, and what I found through that experience was, even if people didn't necessarily agree with the principles of that organization or what it stood for, like, having the they appreciated having the conversation. And, like, 9 times out of 10, I came away with a check. And And so I think make the ask. Like when you're trying to build an alliance with someone in your organization, like the way that I think about that now is you go to them and you say like, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm having a problem with this, or I would really like the opportunity to work on X and I'm not sure how to like get into that organization. Like I would love your advice. Like most people when asked want to help. Like human beings are empathetic things, you know, they want to help you, but I think a lot of the barrier starts with making the ask.
Do you think it helps or does it hurt us that to date WTF has separated itself from men?
I think that's a function of, if you don't mind me going, I think that's a function of what it is you want to achieve with this team, this organization. Because in my mind, I think having women-only organizations is really powerful to have a safe space for us to talk about stuff.
Things that men don't understand.
I mean,
yeah.
stuff, important stuff. And so I guess I think that it's very valuable to have an organization like this, to network, to lift each other up, to commiserate, to share ideas, to find ways to promote each other. But to your point, it can't be the only answer. Like this is not the solution to, you know, having all of us go forth and conquer and, you know, get, you know, more successful in professional lives. Like we have to do this and some other things. So I guess I think it's sort of it's like what you want the purpose of this to achieve that somehow defines in some sense whether it stays women only or whether you broaden it.
Yeah, I mean, this is and thank you for all of the founders and of course with Bryn as well, who I obviously worked very closely with at Megaport and love dearly. I think this has been an amazing platform that what we can do with this. I mean, the founders of this, of WTF have got so much gravitas in the industry, and it's not because I'm sitting up here looking at you, and you have really seen as female leaders in the industry, and what can we do with that? There are so many things that we need to decide. What are those topics that we need to, how can we impact change? And one of those things when we're talking about gender disparity, about whether it's parental leave or whatever it is that's important to all of us, we have now a group of women that are actually going to impact change across multiple organisations, and we can absolutely use that. And I think whether we have men or not in here in the future, that's still going to be the foundation of this organisation.
So we've heard like the benefits of having increased women in an organization, how it leads to increased productivity and profits, and she's telling me I have 5 minutes. So we'll end on this one. What are some of the ways, because I'll let you plug your companies, what are the ways that you and your companies are empowering the women that surround you?
I'll start. I mean, so I have another colleague at the C-level at Equinix named Brandy Morandi, and she is our general counsel and chief HR officer, and she is a rock star. And she recruited a number of other female rock stars at the company to start a women's leadership network, EWLN, Equinix Women's Leadership Network, and that organization has come to have membership of, you know, sort of every manager level and above woman in the company. We are 8 or 9,000 people now, and the amount of programming that the organization does to kind of give women business context that they may lack inside of their own functional domains, and to give women support in terms of helping give their, you know, sort of make their voices heard in terms of business leadership has been really astounding to see. And it's kind of been the trigger for a whole broad diversity, inclusion, and belonging effort at Equinix that our CEO is now kind of helming, Charles Myers, who spends a considerable amount of his time working on DIB initiatives, and he talks about our culture as being like one of the defining reasons why we're successful as a company. And having worked at many other companies before Equinix, like I can honestly say that is absolutely true, that our culture is a defining reason why we have seen business success. And so that's kind of been this virtuous cycle in terms of finding ways to promote women in the workplace. And we're about to get a third woman on our board. We used to be in the S&P Dirty Dozen, which there was like 12 companies in the S&P 500 that didn't have a female board member. And so we've like far eradicated that history, and we're on an awesome path now, and it's great to be a woman where I work.
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing. That's so awesome. I think what I've noticed in the women that I've got on my team, or multiple teams that I've worked across, is the women seem to take on the mental load of their households, whether it be childbearing or looking after a sick parent or looking after their whatever it might be. We take all that stuff and we go and do all the things with it. And my husband, things that magically happen in my house, I don't know about you, but from my perspective, how to support that's really important. So how do you support the women with their mental load or whatever they've got going on? It doesn't need to just be kids. So multiple programs across multiple kind of parts of the organisation is really, really important. Not just, D&I and, inclusion of women. It's actually how do you support each particular thing, and understanding that they take the mental load is a really important thing that certainly some of the men across the executive don't understand. I think there's a bunch of different policies that we should all talk about that is important to us, whether it be, as we said, paid parental leave, or whether it be, and that's obviously different in every country and in every org. But there could, there's multiple different things around the mental load that I think is a whole nother subject and a whole nother thing that we should talk about at WTF.
We can have another panel. Well, thank you so much to Sara and to Belle, and thank you for all of you guys for coming. Thank you very much.